I just completed my 71st birthday yesterday, and having lived 7 decades and a bit more, I wanted to share some of the things that I think I'm learning. Of course, life is a journey, and you learn as you go along, and some of the things you thought you knew before are actually turning out not to be quite what you thought they were. I have been a church leader for most of my adult life. I've been in all kinds of situations. I've pastored churches as the senior pastor, solo pastor, mission projects, as well as here in the United States. And so I have learned a few things, and I think there's something really wrong with the American church. It's not everywhere, but it seems to me like the American church has some real problems. And so let me just say a couple of them real quick for you to think about. For one thing, I think the American church has become very corporate. I've discussed this with some of my friends, and I think they agree that we have adopted the corporate model for church leadership, for church programming, and so forth. In other words, it's all consumer-driven. We got to provide the product or the service or whatever the consumer is looking for, and then do a good job at that, maybe do a better job at that than other churches are doing. And the leadership is top down. There's a CEO, and the CEO sets the agenda and the vision, and the job of everybody under the CEO, including staff pastors, board members, and regular people in the church, is simply to implement that program. I have decided I don't want to be part of that. I don't like that approach, that CEO top down. I hear from God, you carry out what I've heard from God. I've heard that from too many pastors, younger ones, older ones. I was in a service once where the pastor actually said, God has told me things for the coming year. Here's a bunch of different things we're supposed to be doing. And by the way, if God whispers anything in my ear, your job is to make that happen. And I told my wife, which I was sitting beside her right at the moment, and I said, you know what, we're in a cult. It's a cult that has what I consider to be correct evangelical doctrine, but it's a personality cult. It's a control cult. And we decided then and there to make plans to exit gracefully. And I have since stepped back from involvement in another church for similar reasons. All right, so that's one thing, the top-down leadership. Second thing is we care way too much about how we look to other people. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be introspective or that we should never think, okay, what is it that we're doing? Is it appealing to people? Are people getting the message? Maybe we should, alter our message or our approach a little bit. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have become slaves to what is driving people in our culture. That we have become slaves to whatever agenda the makers of our culture, the drivers of our culture are setting for us. So whatever social issues, whatever, supposedly moral causes, whatever, the hip, cool thing to do, we're very into that. And we sometimes have a tendency to play down certain things the Bible says and commands in order to not offend people or in order to push something that's very popular. That's the second thing. Third thing, we are not reaching men. And we are not reaching young people. Now, why is that? Because the gospel has been excessively feminized. I'm not saying it shouldn't have a feminine element to it because God came to save women and men. But we have made the gospel so accommodating and so compassionate and so non-offensive, non-confrontational. A lot of men appreciate a little excitement, a little danger, a little bit of a challenge. And so in removing those things from the way we do business as churches or from the way we preach the message, then we have basically told men that, this is really more for women than it is for you. And I know this is going to get a lot of pushback if it reaches a wider audience, but I think it's the truth. And, I'm married to a very adventurous woman. I'm married to a woman who has been with me on the mission field and been places that aren't exactly safe and done things that most people would not dare to do. So I'm not saying women can't be adventurous or anything, but I know that my wife tends to want things to run smoothly. She doesn't want to be in danger. Neither do I, really. But I know that men tend to think, okay, I need to take some risks. And we have taken risk-taking out of our message. It's all risk-free. And so I think that's a real problem. And I think if we want to reach men, and especially younger men, we need to come up with a gospel that really is authentically Christian and that it involves some risk. I mean, we basically give the message, come to Jesus, and Jesus will forgive you of everything, and you're on your way to heaven. And now your job as a member of the church is to sit down, shut up, and plug in. That's not what young men want to hear. At least not what most young men want to hear. I know that there are some that think that that's just fine. And God bless them. But a lot of young men want to be challenged. They don't want to be told to sit down, shut up, and plug in. They want to be told we need to change things. We need to have big dreams. And if God has set his spirit in each of us, then the pastor is not the only one who can hear from God. Now, I've been a pastor, so I know that you don't want to necessarily hear from everybody in the congregation who has an idea. I get that if you do everything that everybody says they've heard from God about, then the church is actually going to be just spinning its wheels. But on the other hand, if you don't believe that God speaks to people today, that God doesn't really put things genuinely on people's hearts about where the church is going or about something that we as a body ought to be doing, then you have to be right every single time. If you really are the only person that God speaks to, you better be right the whole time. And nobody's that good. All right, so I think what we need to do is we need to rethink American Christianity. We're not entirely wrong. There are problems in churches wherever you might go. And I've been in Africa, and I've been in the Caribbean, and I've been in other places. And I realize in Latin America especially, I've been a lot of times down there. And I realize the church has problems wherever it manifests itself. But these are our problems. And so for that, we need to really rethink things. Aspect Ministries is all about how to reach those people that the church is not reaching. The people who don't feel any pull with the message that we give. The people who already believe that we're irrelevant. The people who have already made up their minds from whatever reason, that they were taught that the Bible is hostile or hateful or not fit for our times. That's what Aspect Ministries is doing. So that's what I'm trying to figure out in my ministry, how to get the message out to those kinds of people and how to help Christians be effective in that way as well. This is Dr. Michael Bogart with Aspect Ministries. I hope this helps.